Good afternoon, everyone. Just to say that we have started at 2 o'clock, but we'll probably hold on just for another couple of minutes because I can still see people coming through into the participants list. So we'll just give it another couple of minutes just for those people to join us. Just to say that today's webinar will be recorded. Please, if you do have any questions, do put those through the Q&A part of the Zoom webinar. I think hopefully you will all be acutely aware, having spent 2020 in lockdown, of how to put questions through that Q&A function within Zoom. But if you are having a problem, obviously let us know through chat. If they go through Q&A, it means that we can answer them in a particularly monitored way, and we can answer those questions following the webinar and follow up on anything that we may need to. Hopefully we'll be able to answer all of your questions today, but it may be necessary for us to take some of this information away and get back to you personally. So I'll just put myself on pause again just for another moment, just while we get the number of participants through the lobby and into the webinar.
Just while we're waiting on one or two, we have had a very early question just to say, is this webinar certification based?
It covers all elements of accreditation, so it is quite a high level webinar, just covering accreditation in general, so application for accreditation, so that hopefully there will be some useful tidbits for anybody who's got an interest in accreditation, whether that be certification, inspection, testing, reference material production. If you're looking for a specific certification one, it's probably not going to hit the spot. What I would suggest is that you watch the recording and kind of flick through to the relevant parts for you. But hopefully we'll be able to cover all of those areas.
Perfect, thank you, Paul. And it's now 2 minutes past 2, so it might be a good idea to make a start. We've still got a couple of attendees trickling through, but I think we're ready to begin.
Okay, well, they can pick us up as we go along. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which is talking about demystifying accreditation and your journey to accreditation. So presumably you will all have an interest in maybe progressing to accreditation. Maybe you're already on that journey and just want kind of a bit more guidance. As the notes say there, we haven't switched on microphones because it can get, with so many people participating, conversations can start. So please, if you do have any questions, put them through the Q&A element of Zoom and we'll get round to those. We'll try and answer them as we're going along by typing, but if there are any larger questions that require my input, obviously I can answer those at the end. So I'll move on, if my computer will let me. So my name is Paul Greenwood. I am the Operations Director for UCAS. I've worked for UCAS for 16 years. I started out as a chemist and as an assessment manager within UCAS, and I've slowly progressed through the organisation. I headed a section, which was the environmental chemistry section, became a divisional director, and now I sit on the executive and the board, and I am responsible for all elements of accreditation within UCAS. So we've recently launched this series of demystifying webinars to support people on their accreditation journey. The first of the series was a webinar which was entitled The Purpose of Accreditation. And that kind of introduced the concept of accreditation to get people started. If you missed that webinar, you can get access to a recording of it on the UCAS website. So that's www.ucas.com. And it's in the events section under resources. Or I think we're running that session again, which is due to be held next year, 30th of March. And I think obviously we'll advertise that, but at the moment that's scheduled for the 30th of March at 2 p.m. So in today's session, I'm going to talk a little bit about UCAS. Who are we? What's accreditation? What's the value of accreditation? How do we undertake assessment? And finally, I guess, having been through all of that, talking about how you apply for accreditation. So again, hopefully You'll be able to get information from this webinar. Hopefully people aren't scribbling away too much, because you can go back and look at this webinar. It is being recorded. So there will be information that's presented, but you can go back and pick up the links separately. I'll try and linger on pages just in case you want to scribble telephone numbers down or website addresses or that kind of thing. Things we'll be covering is accreditation right for you. Are you ready to proceed with accreditation? How to process your application, talking about the way that we do our assessments. So talking about pre-assessment, which confuses some people, our initial assessment, the use of blended assessment. During lockdown, we're having to do a lot of our work remotely. Findings that we raise during our assessments, and then the cycle that then ensues once you've actually been granted accreditation, maintaining that accreditation over years to come. Some rough accreditation costs, and again, talking to UCAS is probably the best approach to get a more accurate figure as to how much the accreditation process would cost you specifically, and then what next. Okay, so starting then, is accreditation right for you? I think we covered this in the last webinar quite extensively, but let's have another look at the benefits of accreditation. Accreditation can highlight gaps or weaknesses in capability. So we're here to shine a light, I guess, on how your operations are working, making sure that you can get best working practice, improve your efficiency, and ultimately outputs. It does provide that independent assurance of competence. So it's kind of a standoff third-party perspective on your ability to conduct accredited activities. People use it and specify it for reducing risks, and obviously it gives confidence from a third-party perspective that technical elements of your operations have been reviewed by people who have knowledge and experience in those technical areas. It supports global trade, and of course anything that is accredited in one economy will be accepted in another economy. So it prevents having to do testing or inspection, certification twice. Supply chains, again, it's making sure that where you're waiting for a part to fit a piece of equipment that you've manufactured, that when you receive that part, it will fit correctly, and it will match a part that you would expect to receive from another manufacturer. So it's about providing that consistency and making sure that the product you receive is acceptable. Gives accreditation, gives confidence to employees, customers, that an organisation is committed to quality and to improving its levels of service, and it generates new business. Again, mentioned before, it's become part of a lot of specifications where people just say immediately, right, okay, well, accreditation gives me this base level of confidence, and that's the minimum level of confidence I'm willing to accept. So an organisation who's going to supply me a product or provide a service needs to have accreditation as a very minimum. I think you can realise savings, and again, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. With additional confidence, we have seen some organisations realise savings in their insurances, for example, where they can demonstrate to the insurance brokers that they have a reduced risk of things going wrong. So can be very useful in that regard. Just some survey results on the right there. 93% of our customers agreed that accreditation provides confidence to their customers and ultimately stakeholders. 76% agreed that accreditation differentiates them from competitors, so it makes them stand out. 85% has helped them improve the quality and validity of their work, and 71% are saying that they need to have accreditation, or accreditation has helped them to maintain or grow their business. So is accreditation applicable to you? UCAS accreditation is granted to organisations who demonstrate that they meet the requirements of relevant national and international conformity assessment standards. And UCAS accredits, you can see from across our symbols here, organisations involved in testing, product certification, personnel certification, calibration, inspection, and then specifically in areas such as biobanking, management systems, reference materials, proficiency testing, validation and verification, medical laboratories. But again, we support additional elements at kind of a lower tier, such as approved bodies. So UKCA is a big area of growth at the moment, and filling the market, making sure that there is sufficient capacity in the UK market for all products and goods and services to have that UKCA mark by the end of 2022. So if you're conducting any kind of activities that fall under any of those standards, accreditation is obviously applicable to you. So what's the first thing to do? Well, the first thing really you need to do is purchase the relevant standard, which is appropriate for your own accreditation or your type of accreditation activity. And the list of standards is set out here. So accreditation is provided against specific standards. And you can have multiple standards against which you're accredited. We have many asbestos organisations, for example, who do testing and inspection. So they are accredited to ISO IEC 17025, but at the same time, ISO IEC 17020. So you can mix and match, and a lot of the certification standards fall under ISO IEC 17021. They're all of the management system certification standards, but organisations commonly have management systems, but also 17065, which is product certification. Some also then have 17024, which is personnel certification. Standards are put together by groups of experts, and we generally credit to international standards. That's what the ISO stands for, International Standards Organization. And the people who put the standards together are a mix, a huge range from not just from Britain, the UK, but also from Europe and in fact global. So the international standards are they are mutually agreed, and they can take a long time to organise and create and review and revise, but the level of quality that they bring into organisations is obviously very consistent across the board. They provide information that organisations need to succeed and deliver their services safely and effectively. So they provide you not just with requirements, but also with guidance generally. You'll find a lot of notes in the standards that will help you formulate your policies, procedures in support of accredited activities to enable you to demonstrate your competence and compliance against the standard. Generally, they are there to define best practice, and they come in a variety of different formats. So we have standards against which we accredit, which is these top level standards, but then we have maybe requirements from particular stakeholders in the UK. So in the UK, we work on behalf of the Environment Agency to provide the MCERTS performance standard, but also from the Drinking Water Inspectorate, for example. So organisations, stakeholders can set additional requirements over and above the requirements of these standards to make things more specific, to give better guidance, to give specific guidance, and make sure that everybody's work that's being produced on their behalf is fit for purpose. These common standards that are here, all available from the BSI website or from ISO directly. I mean, you can buy them from other international standards organisations, but obviously in the UK, British Standards Institute is the default body which is responsible for standards. So they're your first port of call. Once you've had a look through the standard, please feel free to get in touch with Ucas. Some contact details. If you've got general accreditation or technical inquiry, then we've got one telephone number, one email address for you to go to. If you're considering applying for accreditation, then you would talk to our sales and marketing team. And again, information provided there. And we also have supporting training courses for people who are going through the journey to accreditation. And we have a separate training department. Again, information provided there. By getting in touch with UCAS, we can help you identify which application forms you need. We call them AC forms, and each of the different standards has its own unique AC form that you would need to complete. We can guide you to the correct one that you would need to fill out. We can give you an idea of costs involved with applying, answer technical questions. I know that accreditation, the journey to accreditation, can seem quite complex, daunting, but we're here to help. I think that probably the best way of getting in touch with us is by completing the Contact Us form, and you can find that on the UCAS website, which is www.ucas.com. But you'll also find some relevant case studies on our website, which will give you more details about the accreditation process, and maybe you can apply the case studies to give you an idea of cost, complexity, and so on. But as I say, please do try and talk to us. If you'd like to speak to somebody technical, please also fill in the inquiry form. A member of the customer service team will contact you back, and they can put you directly in touch with someone who will have knowledge, awareness, experience in your area of accreditation. The way that UCAS is structured is that we have individual sections which deal with particular areas of accreditation, and we do always try and deploy staff who have at least basic touch points with a knowledge of your areas of accreditation. So I guess next, you need to decide, is your business ready for accreditation? Well, in order to do that, we'll give you on our website a variety of resource materials to help you decide whether you're in a position that's ready to apply for accreditation. But in doing that, I think before you start, there are several things that we recommend you do. Make sure that you're familiar with the standard, ensure you're meeting at least a majority of the requirements of the standard. Understand supporting publications, and you'll find supporting publications not just on the UCAS website, but also maybe on the European Cooperation for Accreditation website, or the ISO website, or the IAF website. All of these names and acronyms are fairly easy to follow. Once you actually hit the UCAS website, there will be trails that will lead you off in a direction that's fairly easy to follow, depending on your particular area of specialism or interest. We've just launched in the 17825 testing arena a readiness tool. And if you complete that readiness assessment tool, it will give you an idea as to whether you're ready to embark on that accreditation journey, or at least identify the areas where you need to focus your attentions and maybe do a little bit more work. And of course, we do have quite a significant training course program that people can attend, and a variety of different mechanisms. Again, I think we'll talk a little bit later about the different types of courses that we run. But we'll have a standards course for pretty much all of those standards, which I showed previously on the slide. So in terms of our publications, organisations are required to comply with current editions of all UCAS publications. So we have targeted publications for laboratories, certification bodies, or inspection bodies, and those are updated routinely. We put out a bulletins update on a monthly basis, so you will find out if there are any changes to any of those publications that you need to familiarise yourselves with. As I say, the links that we have within our own website will drive you or take you to other important websites like the EA, or to IAF, or ISO websites. It is important that you do keep up to date with those publications. And to do that and make that easy, you can sign up to receive a monthly UCAS publications update from our website. So you can see the screen on the right there. You can just click a button and it will ask you to provide your details, and we will automatically email that update document on a monthly basis to you so that you're aware of any changes. The new readiness assessment tool. So the new tool for 17025, this is for testing laboratories. It's a set of questions which allows organisations to check your policies and systems against the expectations of the latest version of the standard. You'll see there that it's ISO IEC 17025 2017. We've just finished the transition. The previous version was 2005. So we are against the latest version of the standard. Against each of the questions, there are 3 potential responses: yes, no, and sort of, which organisations can use to describe whether they believe they meet the requirements of the standard. And I think it's probably best that that is completed either sort of collectively with a group of people who are very familiar with how the system has been put together, whether they be the technical and the quality team who are progressing the organisation towards that accreditation goal, because there may be questions which relate specifically to the technical elements, but also to quality system requirements as well. So how do you find this? It's on the UCAS website. It's fairly well visible under the readiness assessment tool. There will be elements that aren't specifically covered in the readiness assessment tool. It really is a kind of top level tool. Have we hit and satisfied the major requirements of the standard? So there will be some elements that aren't specifically covered. But I think if the answer is yes to most of the questions in the assessment, you're likely to be in a position where you're ready to apply for accreditation. I think the other thing to say is that, you know, this is fairly newly launched. Obviously, we're looking at the success of this as a mechanism, and we will be rolling it out to other areas or other standards as soon as we possibly can, because there are key similarities, particularly in the management system requirements of various standards, which makes it easier for us to bring those to the website more quickly. So as I said, the UCAS Training Academy, we have a series of public courses. We have virtual instructor-led training. We have on-site courses and e-learning. So we can come and do a bespoke course for you, or we can do international advisory services. I think talking to our training department is key in coming to a conclusion as to how best you feel we can provide support in terms of training for you. Most of our customers will have attended public courses which are generally around the requirements of the standards. But we do have a lot of online courses which, again, rather than being taken through by a tutor, they are sort of guided by a tutor rather than sort of a face-to-face interaction. Sorry, I just need to drink. Training isn't mandatory for gaining accreditation, but it is obviously useful in helping you and giving you an opportunity to ask questions about your very specific requirements and things that are coming up as you're developing your systems. It will give you the tools and techniques to kind of plaster those small gaps that will appear as you slowly move towards accreditation. I think the focus from our training is making sure that our customers are empowered to add value to their organisations, and the courses allow staff based in the UK, but also overseas, to attend. and develop their knowledge, develop best practice, and obviously their knowledge and understanding of conformity assessment in general. We do use experts. We do use people who are involved in accreditation on a day-to-day basis. Many of my assessment managers do commit time to providing the training courses, but we also have technical staff who we contract in to give specific technical advice in areas where customers have asked for a specific topic to be covered. So all of our UCAS Academy trainers are current or previous assessment managers, practitioners. They've been there, they've been in your position, they've been on the sort of receiving end of accreditation and have now come over to work for UCAS and to help and support people through their journey. Public courses, the Academy specialises in public training. It's a live environment. It gives the people being taught with an opportunity to meet face-to-face with other people who are experiencing the same difficulties in similar industries, faced with similar challenges. So we end in group discussions and provide lively, interactive learning. So it's more of a group event. The instructor-led training is really for people who are going to struggle to get to a central location. And again, during lockdown, we've seen a lot of people shifting to this virtual instructor-led training. It is a little bit less interactive in terms of talking to your peers and other people on the course, but still really useful. And it's designed to simulate that public course, bringing everybody together in the virtual classroom. But obviously you can't interact face to face, and there's no real opportunity to kind of interact outside of that space. Still that opportunity to express opinions, ask questions, and it's all conducted in real time. So you're not just left alone with a video to watch, you will have people who are there to help and support as you go through. We do run on-site courses, and again, we can come out and train a number of your staff if there's a particular area that you're looking for, or large groups of people who need to have an awareness of accreditation. And again, we can do that either face-to-face, that's the ideal scenario, but again, in lockdown, we can do that virtually and have had quite significant success over the past 18 months, 2 years with that as an approach. And then e-learning on demand, online courses if you're looking for a deeper understanding of some of the more complex topics. On those, you would apply to UCAS. We give you a specific code or number, and you and your colleagues can enroll free of charge on a selection of those e-learning programs. And that's a portfolio of learning training modules, which is constantly growing. Obviously, if you look at the list and you think that there are some things that we've missed, please let us know, and we'll try and develop a course that we can add to that e-learning portfolio for you. So that's a bit about training. How do we actually apply for accreditation? The application process is obviously complete the correct application form. I talked a little bit earlier about the AC form. There's an AC form which is specifically about the technical element of what you do, but there is also an application form which talks about your business and how your business is set up and making sure that you are a unique legal entity. So the application forms that need to come in, we need to have the relevant AC form, we need your management system documentation, so your quality manual, in whatever format that's based, whether it be electronic or hard copy. We need to see the legal status of your organisation. So again, making sure that it's that unique legal entity. We have an agreement which we enter into, so you understand our expectations of you, and we agree our expectations of you. Did I say that the right way around? So we're agreed about expectations of each other. And of course, there's an application fee. And I believe that the communication on the cost of accreditation is or has just been released actually. So you'll be able to find details of the application fees and ongoing fees on the UCAS website. I think if you scroll to the bottom of any page, it will actually tell you what the current terms of business are. If you're based outside the UK and you want to apply for UCAS accreditation, please do contact the sales team in the first instance before you submit any documentation or any fees, because we do need to make sure that we are allowed to accredit you. There are a variety of different rules which say that we need to be in contact with your local accreditation body if you're based overseas. Often we will conduct the assessment together, and in some cases they're unable to provide accreditation for the things that you're looking for, you know, we can in those circumstances provide accreditation to you. We do have a specific area on the website. So if anybody's in this webinar now thinking about applying for sampling or testing for COVID-19, the applications are found in a slightly different place on the website. So if you go to the applications form, which you can see here, www.ucas.com applications, if you go to the foot of that screen, there is a specific area with the forms that need to be completed, and a slightly different application process, but it's very easy to follow. Once you have completed the form and given us all of that information, it's received by our applications unit and we process it. You will get an acknowledgement email with a 5-digit reference number, and that will be your unique reference number while you're with UCAS. That will appear on all communications we have with you, and ultimately it will appear not just on your certificate of accreditation, but also on your schedule of accreditation. As I also mentioned earlier, we have specific sections. So if you are a construction organisation, then or a calibration organisation, you will end up with my construction team. If you deal in food or chemistry or asbestos, you will end up in my agri-food, life sciences and asbestos team. We have an engineering team, forensics, healthcare. So as you can see, there are a variety of different teams, and you will get an acknowledgement from the team that your application has been received and is being processed. First call you will get will always be from the section head. So they will get the basic information from you, but they will, from that basic information, be able to allocate you with a specific manager who will be responsible for maintaining and developing your accreditation. So you will have a single point of contact within UCAS. We call them an assessment manager, who will look after your accreditation and guide you through the whole process. And once your application is submitted, fees paid, assessment manager has been assigned, we can start the assessment process. And we talk about pre-assessment. So what is a pre-assessment and why do we recommend them? A pre-assessment is an informal visit. It's prior to the initial assessment, so we don't raise findings. It's used to determine how ready you are for accreditation, so it supplements that readiness for accreditation. It is optional, but we do clearly recommend it because it's a valuable step in the process. It does help reduce delays. It does help give you an idea of where you need to focus your resources. I think the key thing I would say about accreditation is that we are not consultants. We can't be consultants. We cannot tell you what to do. We can guide you. We can assist you. And, you know, as part of the added value that we provide, you know, we can gently coax you towards maybe some different mechanisms about satisfying the requirements of the standard. But it's not for us to tell you how to implement those. Because fundamentally, if we were to do that, we would end up assessing ourselves. So we would put in a system and we would just be assessing ourselves. And the value of that is it's far limited if we start doing that. Also consultancy, we're not going to be that familiar with your organization, and we may tell you to do something which isn't suitable for you. As an assessment manager, I'll give an example. I used to assess 2 organizations, and on one day I would be in a laboratory where all samples were recorded in a diary. And it was really easy just to get the data from a diary. Next day, I was in a huge organization. Trying to record samples in a diary would have been massively impractical. They were barcoding samples as they came in on a massive conveyor belt. So two ways of satisfying the same requirement of the standard. One of them is very sort of administrative in terms of a lot of writing, but actually there isn't much writing going on. Would never have worked in a large organization, but barcoding would have been massive overkill for the guy who was filling things in a diary. So it's really interesting, certainly from the accreditation manager's perspective, to look at how does your organization meet the requirements of the standard. So pre-assessment visit is an opportunity for us to talk maybe a little bit more openly. I guess I would say under advisement that it's probably the closest we could come to consultation. You can ask us questions and we can point you maybe in a direction that we couldn't do during an assessment. Generally, it will be a visit with an assessment manager and probably just one, maybe two, depending on the size and scope of your accreditation or what you're applying for, specific technical assessors. So it gives you the opportunity to ask the assessment managers questions and kind of dispel some of that fear about going into the initial assessment, which is the point at which the whole making sure that you are competent and compliant actually starts. We can give that impartial external perspective on your quality management system. So we will review your QMS, we'll look at your quality documentation, we'll look at the structure of your organization, and we'll give you a report at the end of this pre-assessment, which gives you information about areas on which to concentrate before you go for that initial assessment. So identification of any potential showstoppers that might come up as part of the initial assessment. And again, by having it, it does generally mean that we don't end up with additional expense, because organizations who go through pre-assessment generally are successful at initial assessment. Those that don't have a pre-assessment are more likely to end up with an initial assessment that we kind of stop halfway through and say, look, okay, you're not ready. And we maybe turn that into a pre-assessment and then we go to an initial assessment a little bit further down the line. As I say, it's not compulsory, so completely over to you as to whether you want to have a pre-assessment or not. And if you've got good prior knowledge and experience of accreditation, I would say it's probably not going to be something that you're going to want to participate in simply because you've got that knowledge already. What are the common problems that we see when we do a pre-assessment? Generally, it's misunderstanding requirements of standard and sector schemes, missing requirements within the standard, or more often than not, it is about misinterpretation. So not just necessarily misunderstanding, but thinking that you've been asked to do one thing when in fact the requirements of the standard are very clear about it needs to be done this way, or you need to have satisfied this particular specific requirement. It could be that you have looked at the standard and UCAS documents, but there are additional requirements which are placed on conformity assessment bodies by the international accreditation organisations, IAF, ILAC, EA. It could be that you haven't implemented processes and policies. It's very difficult if we come to do an initial assessment and you just show us what you intend to do. It's virtually impossible for us to give a positive recommendation because we can't actually see how that practice is actually shaping up. Equally, it could be that the practice doesn't match the documented policy and process. And again, we see this quite a lot, and even in organisations who have accreditation, where they've got a set of policies and procedures, and slowly they kind of move across simply because it's easier or maybe even better in some cases to do things slightly differently. But the paperwork hasn't kept up with that. And again, you know, an example of that in my head is when you see at the corner of a road, for example, a grass verge, and you see a muddy path across the corner, because that's the quickest and easiest way to go. So why not make that tarmac that path and make that the route by which people follow, because obviously it's easier for them to go that way. And again, the business doing the right thing, but you haven't got the documentary evidence that proves it. So you haven't got those records, you haven't got the documented procedures which support the fact that what you're doing is actually technically right. But if you ever try and come back and rebuild what was the situation at a particular point in time, it would be impossible to do that. So it's about traceability. So we look at management systems. Why is it important to have a management system? Well, quality management system is obviously the way that an organization manages all of the different parts of its business, pulls them together, and we look at things holistically to ensure that the whole organization achieves its objectives. That's why we call it an assessment rather than an audit. We deploy staff who are assessors, and they will look at the whole operation to make sure that the whole thing is fit for purpose. Because if one part of a business isn't working well, it will have an impact on the rest of the business. We kind of define it differently as assessors rather than auditors, because auditors go in and make sure that a process is being followed. So it's very well you can follow a process and put a tick in a box and say, yes, we're doing that, we're doing that, we're doing that, we're doing that. But what's not happening there is we're not making sure that that process ties in and works well with all of the other processes. The quality management system is a really important set of documents because it is the blueprint of your accreditation, and it does contain all of those policies to satisfy all of the requirements of the standard. Again, when you're putting a management system together, it's thinking about the efficient use of resources, making sure that you're minimizing impact of one thing on another, or aligning certain activities so that you get best business model. Excuse me. Identifying efficiencies, making sure that you haven't got duplication. And again, it's quite often that we'll go into an organization and some of our recommendations might seem rather odd, in as much as, do you actually need to do that? Have you thought about whether you need to do that? And I think if you're sitting there on the other side of the table and we're asking you those questions, it's because we think that maybe you've gone above and beyond what's necessary to actually to meet the requirements of the standard, but that by losing that or stopping doing a particular activity, it's not going to have any massive detrimental impact on your business. So, you know, we will act as a mirror, I suppose, and just kind of hold that up and say, have you thought about? And that's important and something that you need to consider as you're developing those management systems. Again, you can have a look at the slide. 9001 defines a quality management system, and actually a lot of the 17,000 series standards, 1785, 1784, 1781, all of those do generally tie in with ISO 9001. And the objective there is that you can apply a common quality management system, which then draws in all of the different elements of activities that you might want to consider under accreditation. So if you've satisfied that you have a management review meeting every year, that will not just satisfy the requirements of 17825, it would also satisfy the requirements of 1784, 1751, and so on and so on. So rather than having this management system which becomes massive and unwieldy, What we want to do is strip it back to the bare bones and make sure that it's fit for purpose, people understand it, and that it's implemented. So, conformity assessment standards, long term, but this is the 17025, 17021, 17020 standards, generally share those common elements. So they have general requirements, structural requirements, resourcing, processes, and management system requirements. And it's thinking about those management system requirements in terms of making sure that your documents are available to staff for them to get hold of, that they are traceable, so that you haven't got old versions of procedures out with staff. Maybe you've got staff who are operating remotely, delivering their services from their van or from their own home. Have they got copies of the latest versions of the procedures? Making sure that when they make records, that those are controlled and that they get back to a central system. Anything that's identified as being a failure in the system, the action's being taken, not just to address it, but to prevent its recurrence. Making sure that you're looking at your own systems, because you can't rely on our audits. Our expectation is that you will conduct audits, that you will identify your own issues in your own mechanisms and policies and procedures, and that you will correct those. That's part of your part of what we expect you to do as a competent organisation. And again, I mentioned management review. So is top management committed to this improvement in quality, in sorting issues out? So all of that sort of forms part of that pre-assessment process. It's all things that you need to consider before we come and do our initial assessment. And the initial assessment is, again, it generally forms part of the entire assessment process, but we will always, whatever type of assessment we have with you, once we've been through the pre-assessment, we will have an opening meeting. So we make sure that you understand why we're there and what's going to be done, who's going to be doing it, and how long that's all going to take. We want to see records. We want to see how you have conducted activities, that the records are there to support them. We will talk to staff and we will watch them doing things, whether that be a certification activity, whether it be a testing activity, maybe calibrating a piece of equipment. But we will want to watch to make sure that they demonstrate the knowledge, experience, and ability to do the activity for which we're granting accreditation. We do vertical and horizontal assessment, and people sort of look at me quizzically and say, what's the difference between vertical and horizontal? Well, we might start a horizontal assessment by looking at purchasing, for example. So you've purchased some supplies, some reagents for a chemistry laboratory. So let's look at all of the reagents that have come in to do this particular test, and we look at that as a particular category. Alternatively, or additionally, we may come in and say, right, okay, I want to see this particular sample, and then we'll track it back through the process. So this is now a vertical audit, vertical assessment, where we look at how the result was generated by following it through, from its receipt at the laboratory, right through how it was prepared, who prepared it, what records were kept, what reagents were used. And that's where you see the crossover. You see the horizontal and the vertical at the same time, because you catch them both in that place. Following the visit, during the visit, we will raise any non-conformances against the standard, and we will discuss those with you. You obviously have an opportunity to kind of reject or query why a particular finding's been raised. Again, we'll ask you for a corrective action. So initial thoughts on, okay, we've agreed that this is something which is non-conforming with the standard. but what actually do we need to do to correct that and fix it and make sure it's going to not happen again, or that a particular issue is resolved, and what caused it. We always look for a root cause. So why was this a fault? Why did this happen? Because this might have a knock-on effect into other areas of the business that we need to consider and think about. All of that is generally conducted during the assessment, but we'll also cover it at a closing meeting. So we'll talk about the meeting, we'll give you a summary of the assessment at that final closing meeting. And then we will give you a full report, and it will have information in there, not just from the assessment manager, who will have looked generally at the management system, but from the technical assessors, and anything that we've looked at will be recorded and provided in that report, so that you can get a sense of why certain things have been raised, particular areas of weakness, particular areas of strength. It's really important that we say this is a great area that the organisation have focused on. And then we expect you to kind of come up with a final mechanism for clearing those findings. It may be that the first suggestion is not the one you decide to go along. You may decide that on the day of the assessment, if a bottle wasn't labelled, you're going to relabel all the bottles. Well, actually, it could just be that there were all the bottles that came in from a particular supplier. So maybe your corrective action is not to look at all the bottles, which is going to take you 10 times longer than just looking at the bottles that came from a particular place. So initial assessment, when does that happen? Generally, experience would say that it takes place around about 3 months after pre-assessment, and once the issues that have been raised at that pre-assessment have been addressed. And it is, again, initial assessment, just to highlight, it is the first formal assessment within what we call the accreditation cycle. The assessment manager plans it, and obviously we'll discuss the planning of that with the customers, and we'll propose an assessment team and conduct, have discussions with you. And then you will get a visit confirmation, visit plan, and a proper quotation against which you can agree that that work is going to be conducted. I guess the final part of this is that at that closing meeting, the team will make a recommendation, and that recommendation is provided to an independent decision maker. So somebody will look at that recommendation that's provided by the team and come to a conclusion as to whether what has been recommended by the team is supported by the content of the report that's provided.
Sorry, Paul, Emily, to interrupt. Yes, it was just in case you haven't had a chance to look at the clock. We're nearing the end of the hour that we've got for this one, and we've got a good load of Q&As to get through. So it was just a quick reminder on time for the last few slides. The
last half of the slides I've got. Okay, I'm going to steam through it then. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. So, blended assessment. I'll leave the slides up just quickly. We are doing blended assessment whereby we are working from home a lot. So we can do assessments remotely. It may be that we are able to do a full initial assessment remotely, but generally we do want to see customers on site, because it does limit our ability to see your working environment. We do sometimes get technology glitches, but generally it's a really good mechanism. It does save time and money. Assessment findings. So non-conformity, which I've talked about before, is the failure to meet a requirement of the standard. So we will raise improvement actions as part of our report. You have to then say what you're going to do to address those findings, and we'll look at a root cause. And we generally, at initial assessment, give you 3 months to look at those. Once you're accredited, that time reduces because you should be operating a mechanism which is compliant. So once you're accredited, the time for feedback on subsequent visits reduces to 4 weeks. But obviously, if there's anything serious, we would want to see evidence more quickly than that. We have an independent decision-making process. So at all stages, there will be somebody who's ratifying whether we have identified the right amount of time to conduct the assessment, the right people to conduct the assessment with the right technical skills, and that it meets your requirements. So what you've applied for, making sure that we've addressed all of the issues in there. As soon as we've done the assessment, we will conduct a provisional decision. So while you're clearing or closing or providing evidence for any findings that we've raised, the report will go to a decision maker who will review the report and the findings that were raised and come to a conclusion as to whether the recommendation that was provided is valid. And then we have a final decision. So once you've cleared all of your corrective actions, the independent decision maker will revisit it to make sure that all the corrective actions have been cleared satisfactorily, and we can go to final decision and grant. So you've got your accreditation. We will send you a set of symbols. So dependent upon what accreditation you have been successful in, we will send you these electronic symbols that you can apply to a variety of different stationery, etc., stands, websites, and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, there are rules because it's the crown on there. It's the symbols are property of Her Majesty the Queen, and as part of our agreement with her, you cannot put the symbols on vehicles, flags, goods or products, or packaging, but you can put them on a variety of other bits and bobs, so stationery, advertising, all of those kinds of things. So you can demonstrate that you've got accreditation. Promoting accreditation, all of this is with our marketing team. We've got a variety of brochures, videos. We participate in World Accreditation Day, opportunities here for case studies, and you may want to send us a testimonial or get involved with us to promote your accreditation. We routinely have Twitter feeds and LinkedIn posts and all the rest of it where organizations have received their certificates of accreditation and so on and so forth. So we will promote your accreditation in the wider community. Maintaining accreditation is on a 4-year rolling program. So we will come back each year just to make sure that you're maintaining your accreditation. And the process is exactly the same as the initial assessment, in slightly less depth, until we come back in 4th year when we would do the equivalent of an initial assessment again. So we go back into that depth a little bit more deeply. But we do have to make sure that we've reviewed all of your technical competence and ability over that 4-year accreditation cycle. So costs, again, you can have a look at the website. There's only one example in here, but as a fairly small testing laboratory doing soils analysis, the pre and initial probably comes to around £15,000, and then annually probably of the order of £4,000 to £6,000. So just to give you an idea, but again, please contact UCAS, have a discussion, and we'll give you much clearer indication of costs. And then finally, what next? Well, it's that good old slide again. If you've got any queries, please do get in contact. If it's accreditation or about anything technical, please contact info@UCAS. If you're considering applying, get through to our marketing team who are sales at UCAS. And if you want to do any training, it's training at UCAS. But of course, all of this will be available post-webinar. So, questions? Sorry, and I know I've run pretty close to time.
Outstanding. 1 minute left for Q&A. Thank you for all of you staying on. Sorry, I've got someone in the office here just opening a bag of crisps loudly. Apologies, everyone. Yes, so Q&A. We've got a couple in from Teresa, if we start with hers. So will ISO IEC standards ever adopt a high-level structure to make multiple standards easier to integrate?
Yes, that's that ISO 9000. Whenever one of the 17,000 series, and in fact, now pretty much all of those standards, whenever they're reviewing them, they will try and align them to meet the requirements of 9000. So it's having that common structure, if you like, whereby you can satisfy the requirements of many standards by satisfying just one. Hope that answers that question.
Yes, I think it does. And she's also said what level of implementation would be expected for a startup? Okay.
Generally, we'd want to see that you'd got the policies and procedures in place, that you've got a management system, and that you'd at least started implementing some of those. I would probably expect that you've done some internal audits yourself, because that demonstrates to us what your internal audit process is like and how effective it is. All of this is about the effectiveness of what we can see at initial assessment. And we absolutely understand that at that point, your organization will be in its infancy. But if we're looking at your audits and you're not making any findings as part of those, if you're not finding any problems, and then we come in and do our initial assessment, we find loads of findings, it calls into question a little bit how effective your audits are. So we'd expect people to be following the policies and procedures, but we do appreciate that you're probably not going to have an awful lot of records, but you do need to have made a start.
Perfect, thank you, Paul. And someone's had a chat with one of the colleagues in the sales team and has said that she's been given a rough estimate for about 12 to 15,000 for accreditation. You did go through the cost briefly, but yeah, she's asked whether they're expected to pay for it in one go or as soon as they sign up. Could you maybe just explain the application fee and then how payments for initial assessments are taken?
Yeah, absolutely. Application fee is payable as you put in your documents. So that's £1,500. And that will mean that we got sufficient admin opportunity to review your the basic fundamentals, because we'll go through your application forms, your management system and all the rest of it before we kind of progress any further. Because we don't want you to get onto a journey and then just turn around and say, well, no, you were never going to be able to be accredited. So application fee comes in with your application. You'll then get a quote, and we will have had some form of discussion with you about your credit rating. So it may be that if you haven't got a great credit rating, that we would expect payment up front, but generally most people go on to 30-day payment terms. So you would have the assessment and then pay for it once you've had the assessment. Generally, we do look for payment in advance from overseas customers.
Perfect, thank you for the breakdown, Paul. Christine has asked if they become accredited as an inspection body and they assess businesses' conformance for service provision to a set of industry standards, are they accrediting them? Really good question, I think, because there's often a bit of confusion in the market about when you're accredited, do you then accredit?
No, that works in two ways. We aren't allowed to accredit people who perform accreditation, but at the same time, nobody else is allowed to perform accreditation. So no, it's not an accreditation. I'm happy to talk about the specifics of that, but an inspection body, it's kind of a standalone activity. So I'm happy to kind of take that one offline and discuss that. But no, we can't accredit other accreditation bodies, and what an inspection body or a certification body does is not accreditation.
Perfect, thank you. We will put that one out in the FAQs, and then if you did need any more information, Christine, please feel free to get in touch. There was one from Gary, but it looks like he's had to drop off the call, so we can come back to that in the FAQs. this, I'm not sure if you'll know what this code means, Paul. So there is someone who works for an inspection management software company.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the businesses that they work with are either UCAS accredited or working towards UCAS accreditation.
Mm-hmm.
And as a solution to these organisations, they'd like to ensure their system supports their customers with UCAS inspections 9202. Which I did do a quick Google search for, but I couldn't find anything. So how, as a business serving industries that are going for accreditation, could they work with UCAS to ensure the system provides the features and services required by their customers?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if there's an international standard for it, for inspection for it, and there's a set of criteria that can be provided for it, then we should be able to accredit that as an inspection activity. Hope that answers the question. Again, it's very specific, but certification bodies are certifying software under ISMS, which is an Information Security Management System Protocol 27001. And it may be that that's supported by some inspection activity. But yes, we can accredit inspection bodies to do that kind of thing.
Brilliant, thank you, Paul. And again, if that didn't answer your question, please get in touch with us after the webinar about your specific requirements. Another one that's anonymous: can you accredit labs outside of the UK?
Yes, we can, but I think often the answer to many questions that we get posed is it depends. We have an agreement with our with organisations in the European Cooperation for Accreditation, that only one accreditation body will service the needs of their customers in that particular country. So, for example, if you were based in France, you would seek accreditation from COFRAC. Now, it may be that COFRAC don't offer accreditation for the thing that you want, in which case we can come and do the assessment for you. It may be that for some specific reason you want UCAS accreditation. Maybe your customers are demanding it or whatever. Again, we can do that, but we will generally work with the local accreditation body to get that accreditation sorted out. So we would accredit you, but probably the work will be subcontracted to the local accreditation body. The rules are somewhat different if you're located outside the EA area, so outside the European Union. We do accredit organisations, quite a lot of organisations in the Middle East and China. We have a few in America and South America. But again, specifically, contact the sales team and they'll pass that information or pass that request on to us. But in all cases, we are a community, and we're a very close community, and we will need to talk to your local accreditation body, and wherever you are, you will have a local accreditation body. So generally, we will contact that local accreditation body and work collaboratively with them.
Excellent, thank you, Paul. And there is a little more information on our overseas process, again, on the UCAS website. So if you are a lab outside of the UK and you wanted to apply with UCAS, there's a lot of information. And as Paul said, please get in touch with the sales team. Finally, then, I think, and Paul, you might have to take a look at this Q&A as well, because I'm not sure that I understand it fully. Diana has asked, will UCAS raise a non-conformity in case of naming non-conformity as findings in the internal audit? Oh, okay. If we were to name a non-conformity as a finding in their internal audits, would we raise a non-conformity on that? She said, having same approach and giving freedom to lab manager to decide on actions, CAPA, NCW correction. Thanks.
No, it's however you define. As I say, you can call anything you like, as long as everybody understands what it is. And this kind of goes back to the point I was making about one mechanism will work for one organisation and not for another. So you go in and you start talking about findings, and sometimes you have to change your approach, because findings, when you're on an assessment, might mean something completely different to that customer as opposed to a customer you see the next day. So yes, we have to adapt our approach to you, really.
Fantastic. Right, that is all of the Q&A finished. So I don't think there are any final questions that we've missed.
Okay, apologies for overrunning
the chat. Thanks
I'll try and talk
so
more quickly in March.
Thank you ever so much to you all for holding on today. Apologies, I've just seen that a question has been missed in the chat rather than the Q&A. Bear with me just a moment. Can you, I think this is one that's still a little up in the air at the moment. Paul, are you able to comment on accepting
14065 accreditations from other EU member states in scope 12 activity 2021 verification season? It is all very up in the air, and it's all about EU ETS and UK ETS. And again, that's a very specific one. So Guido, if you want to give us a bit more information, I can certainly answer that one more specifically for you.
I think this is already in discussion with Kirsty and a number of other members, possibly Kevin and Rob as well. So yes, I believe Kirsty's working on coming back to Guido.
Okay.
Yes, but thank you very much, and apologies, Guido, I had missed that in the chat. Okay, everyone, thank you ever so much for your time today. Thanks for attending. We will send the recording out and a copy of the presentation to you all shortly. But thank you ever so much to you, Paul, as well. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Take care.